Come on, you could very easily add a whole layer of progression and difficulty to your push-ups and all the push-ups I gave you today by simply... Yo, what's the crack? So, summer is coming up and some of you might want to get in better shape, look more muscular for the next time you take off your shirt in public. I get it, been there, done that. If that's you, let me tell you that there is no better place to start than push-ups. Aside from the fact that the push-up is an excellent way to initiate beginners into the world of resistance training, there is literally no material requirement. You get down to the floor and you start doing them. To me, the biggest perk of this horizontal pressing movement is that it's going to lay a solid foundation of upper body pushing strength. On top of that, from a muscle building perspective, the push-up is going to do a pretty good job at growing your front delts, pectoralis, and triceps. But one of the biggest issues I see when beginners are first introduced to the push-up is that they tend to do the same variation and volume. I actually made a video about a year ago explaining why the so-called 100 push-ups per day challenges are a little bit scammy. Please don't get me wrong, I think this type of challenges could work for a short while, but let's keep it real. Anything would get you results as a novice. However, my point in that video is that things are bound to get stale if you keep doing the same thing over and over and over again. But that's not gonna happen to you if you watch that video, because then you would understand the importance of progressive overload and how to apply it to that specific challenge. And if you keep watching today's episode, because you will be able to introduce some variation to your push-ups. So now I'm gonna show you a few push-up variations to train your upper body in slightly different angles so that you can prioritize certain muscle groups over others if that's what you like. The following push-up variations require none to minimal equipment, so these could be very beneficial and useful for those of you who mainly train at home. And lastly, please stick till the end of this video, because I'm going to share a tip on how to get the absolute best of your push-up training. The angle of your forearms essentially determines which muscle group is going to get prioritized based off the variation you pick. If your forearms draw a perfectly perpendicular line to the floor, then you're doing the standard version of a push-up, which is an all-rounder by design. But if your forearm travels forward, then you're placing your front deltoids at a weaker mechanical position. So, out of the three main movers, this muscle group would have to work the hardest. As you lean forward to get into position, you would also have to adjust your wrists by rotating them externally. That way, you would lessen the level of discomfort at this joint. Additionally, you will also have to rock your feet forward. These two small adjustments are going to turn a regular push-up into a pseudo-planche version. This exercise could be of special relevance to those of you who are into calisthenics, and a planche is a skill you'd like to unlock in the future. Just make sure that you keep your form consistent throughout your sets by performing this exercise with your head close to a flat surface. The tactile feedback you get from the wall would prevent you from decreasing the forward lean as muscular fatigue in the front deltoids kicks in. This is by far the hardest push-up variation in today's episode, so most beginners won't be able to complete the necessary volume to cause a hypertrophic response on their front delts. So if you're not that interested in the strength transfer to the planche, but you still really want to grow your shoulders anyway, I think bike push-ups are a more appropriate tool to accomplish that goal. But let me get back to those later on in the video. The biomechanical result of you letting your forearm travel in the opposite direction is a push-up with a very strong emphasis on the triceps. A cue that helps me stay consistent with my form is to lower my chin slightly above the tip of my fingers. The de-emphasis of the two biggest muscle groups in a push-up, that is the front delts and pecs, makes this variation extremely challenging for the triceps. If you're still a beginner and can't do multiple reps of this exercise with proper form, just shorten your plank by bringing your knees to the floor. Or if you train at a calisthenics park, you could find a height that allows you to accumulate enough volume in a single training session. If getting bigger arms is a priority for you and you want to train mainly through calisthenics, including this push-up at home could be very beneficial. If adjusting the height is not a possibility at home, I recommend for you to take a step back and get mighty strong at the following triceps-friendly variation. As you just saw, a slight adjustment of angles can hugely alter the biomechanics of a lift, and hand placement width is no exception in this regard. By simply bringing your hands closer to one another and tucking in your elbows, you turn a regular push-up into a close grip push-up. Me personally, I never do the diamond variation due to a past injury in my right wrist. But if you can do this pain-free, be my guest. I personally find a little bit of separation in between my hands to be much more comfortable for me to do this horizontal press. Over here, I can do push-ups no problem. In any case, a narrow hand placement forces a higher degree of elbow flexion at the bottom of the movement. So naturally, this kind of push-up is going to make your triceps work extra hard as you overcome the resistance on your way up, since the triceps' primary function is to extend the elbow. However, if you were to assume a wider hand placement during your push-ups, you'd be creating the opposite effect. You'd de-emphasize the triceps in favor of the pectoralis muscle. Among others, a key function of your chest is to bring your arms across your body. And this is exactly the anatomical function that becomes more difficult when you perform wide push-ups. The biggest issue I see with this chest-focused push-up variation is a typical misuse by beginners due to the lack of body awareness in space. Wide push-ups should not be an open invitation to elbow flaring. Please record yourself from the front and spare yourself from aches and pains down the road. Another harder variation of a push-up is the one performed with some degree of feet elevation. But in this particular case, the decline push-up wants to favor the upper portion of the chest due to the alignment of the muscle fibers in relation to the direction of the force you produce. However, bear in mind that there is a limit on how much you can emphasize the clavicular section of the pectoralis during push-ups before you run into the issue of shortening the range of motion. Let me explain. Once your feet start getting as high as your head at the starting position of a push-up, then the range of motion will inevitably suffer as a result of basically having a head. The only way to fix this issue is by creating a deficit. The free version of a deficit would be to ball a fist and place a towel underneath to cushion your knuckles. By virtue of making your hand into a fist, you gain 2 to 3 inches of range of motion. If that's enough for your level and that's all you can afford, then knock yourself out. But if you want to extend your range of motion a little bit more, you could either buy a yoga block or a cheap set of push-up bars. I personally prefer the latter as I can do push-ups with a neutral grip. Gaining a few inches on your push-ups is going to add extra difficulty to this horizontal press. From a hypertrophic standpoint, the deficit allows for a higher degree of shoulder extension, and thus both your chest and front delts would have to work harder. The muscle stretch at the bottom is incredible, and I can't recommend this push-up progression enough for those of you who train the calisthenic staples at home. If we're talking about hypertrophying your shoulders and the upper portion of your chest, then I would have to mention the pike push-up. I think this variation could have a place in a hypertrophy program at home for as long as a deficit is in place. But given the extreme technical complexity of the lift, as well as the fact that this is not a horizontal press per se, I'm not going to include it in today's video. If you want to learn how to perform pike push-ups with proper form, avoid the typical mistakes beginners make, and learn how to progress this movement over time, make sure to watch this video after finishing today's episode. Spoiler alert, a pike push-up is not simply a vertical press contrary to what many people think. I'm feeling very generous today, so I'm actually going to give you 2 extra tips. The first one is to be patient.
No! God, please, no! No!
Strength and muscle building actually represent the complete opposite of the current zeitgeist, where you could pretty much get almost anything at the tip of your finger. The short-term dopamine craving, instant gratification mindset modern society constantly promotes is not gonna fly here. Strength is a virtue that requires time and commitment. By the way, right now you're looking at a set where the form and tempo are very intentional and consistent. I'd invite you to pursue mastery of the regular standard push-up before you jump into harder progressions like the ones I presented to you today. Let your joints, muscles, and connective tissue adapt over time instead of trying to add variation just for the sake of adding variation. And the second piece of advice I give you is to not be dogmatic and simply disregard external load as a way of progression because you are quote-unquote a calisthenics athlete. Come on, you could very easily add a whole layer of progression and difficulty to your push-ups and all the push-ups I gave you today by simply weighing it back and putting a plate in it. It's not rocket science. You add weight, make your push-ups harder, rinse and repeat, and get those gains. If you liked today's video, check out this must-watch video on how to do push-ups with absolute pristine form. I think you're gonna like it. Please give me a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to click on the bell to get notified every time a new video goes live. Stay fit, stay strong, help me raise an army of Super Saiyans all around the world. Peace.